brought to you by Thomas Allgeier and Freinis. This edition highlights key LinkedIn posts on future mobility and market evolution in weeks 47 and 48. Freinis supports enterprises with market and competitive intelligence, decoding disruptive technologies, customer needs, regulatory change, and competitive moves, so product teams and strategy leaders don't just react, but shape the future of mobility. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're bringing you a really distilled shot of intelligence from the mobility industry, looking exclusively at the strategic insights shared on LinkedIn during calendar weeks 47 and 48.
And what really stands out in the source material is this tension. You have a mobility sector caught between two massive forces.
Okay, well, what are they?
Well, on one side, you've got this incredibly rapid technological deployment. I mean, autonomy is moving from these cautious city pilots into actual commercial corridors.
Right.
But on the other side, there's intense operational scrutiny. Cities are starting to reframe basic things like parking and curbside access as really critical strategic assets.
Yeah. So, our mission today is to dive into the top trends that define that intersection, where the tech hits the tarmac and meets regulatory reality. Let's start with the high-octane part, the global autonomous deployment race and public trust.
Absolutely. The whole conversation has decisively shifted. Ryan Livert observed that the robotaxi race, it's not really about who builds the better sensor suite anymore.
It's a deployment game now.
It's a pure deployment and rapid scaling game. That's it.
And what's fascinating is that the scaling is happening globally. While the U.S. giants often focus on domestic expansion, we're seeing Chinese players just aggressively filling what Livert called a strategic gap.
WeRide is the perfect example of this. Roger Wanella noted their recent success in Switzerland, getting a driverless permit there.
That's a huge deal, a regulated European market.
A huge step. And it gets bigger. Rana Maristani highlighted they're also authorized for operations in Saudi Arabia.
Which, as we know, is pouring money into future mobility.
Exactly. So WeRide is now the only tech company with autonomous driving permits in 8 different countries. That global footprint, it's not just for bragging rights, it's a massive data advantage.
It is. But the real game changer here is the economics of it all. John Coetzier provided this critical comparison of the leading players.
Right.
Baidu's Apollo Go is already doing a staggering 250,000 rides a week. I mean, that kind of volume translates into data velocity that very few competitors can even touch.
And this is where the cost model becomes that economic earthquake. Baidu's RK 6 vehicle has level 4 autonomy. It's packed with 1,200 TOPS of compute power.
And let's just pause on that for a second. TOPS, tera operations per second. That's the raw measure of processing speed. So 1,200 it's a massive amount of power.
It's what you need to run all the sensing and decision-making in real time.
Exactly. And Baidu delivers that level 4 performance in a vehicle that costs under $30,000.
Okay, so contrast that with Waymo's vehicles,
which traditionally run well over $100,000. So you see the future pricing pressure right there. A $70,000 cost delta completely changes the fleet replacement cycle and the long-term viability of these networks.
Which is exactly why U.S. companies have to scale so aggressively. Arturo Perez de Lucia Gonzalez pointed out Waymo is pushing hard into highway operations, San Francisco, Phoenix, L.A.
That highway expansion is crucial, isn't it? It signals they're moving toward maximum utilization, trying to redefine their own cost models to compete.
But all of this scaling brings us right back to the most critical constraint.
Public trust.
Public trust. Jackie Lavornia shared her experience in a Waymo and just emphasized how paramount that feeling of trust is for mass adoption. When the tech moves this fast, governance has to lead, not lag behind.
This accountability vacuum is a huge concern. Dominique Shelton-Leipzig argued that when there's a tragic accident, the failure isn't just an algorithm bug.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's the lack of rigorous testing, a lack of responsible data governance. It's a leadership failure from the board level down.
That's a pretty serious indictment of corporate responsibility.
Yeah.
And that need for oversight. It hits different cultural walls depending on where you are in the world, doesn't it?
It does. Manuel Steger offered this fascinating comparison between German and American views. An Uber driver observed that Waymos have 80% fewer accidents than human drivers. In the U.S., that's seen as huge progress.
But Steger suggests that, the German conservative mindset tends to look at the residual risk.
The remaining 20% of accidents.
Right. That's seen as a fundamental blocker.
So if the U.S. celebrates the 80% win and keeps deploying, while Germany stalls over the 20% risk, doesn't that just grant American companies a massive, maybe permanent deployment and data advantage?
It certainly looks that way. The speed of deployment is directly tied to a society's risk tolerance. And that mindset clash is really defining the global pace of this rollout.
That clash between high-tech deployment and the need for governance is a perfect segue. It seems like whether we're talking about a complex robotaxi or a simple e-scooter, the challenge is the same.
A failure to govern shared public space effectively.
Exactly. Which brings us to urban governance, planning, and micromobility trade-offs.
Yeah, cities are trying so hard to meet these sustainable mobility goals, but they're just constantly being derailed by the chaos on the street.
The micromobility issue is just so messy, and Prague is a textbook case study. Lars Christian Grudem Olsen detailed how shared e-scooters were banned there.
With overwhelming public support, right?
Overwhelming, 82%. But the reason wasn't really safety. They cited 47 scooter injuries versus 2 from bikes. The real problem was the parking clutter.
The visual nuisance.
Sidewalks, tram stops. It was an operational mess.
It's a classic negative externality. The operators, they have to collaborate on self-regulation, on strict parking fines. Because if the city has to bear the cost of enforcement, the politically popular answer is always just to ban them.
But a ban is often misguided. Bram Sayers pointed this out in Brussels. Scooters are GPS tracked, they're highly traceable.
So banning them to curb crime is pretty ineffective.
Right. What it does do is punish people who rely on them because they don't have a car or a license.
And that reliance just proves how resilient micromobility is as, a key part of the urban backbone. Jessen Attaché confirmed that during transit strikes in Brussels, Voisaw ridership surged by up to 120%.
Wow.
And Frederick Hilm also noted that nearly half of all Voi riders use them to connect with public transport, to fill those desert zones between the major transit stops.
That dependency just highlights the systemic failure of our traditional urban planning models. Robert Joseph Martin brought up this critical flaw in cities like Copenhagen.
The traffic demand models.
They're wildly outdated. They still use these fixed trip rates, like assuming 3.1 car trips per apartment based on these old national car-heavy averages.
So they end up drastically over-engineering the infrastructure for cars, even in new core light developments. They're forced to build parking and roads for a demand that doesn't even exist in a modern neighborhood.
The counter-narrative to that is intelligent, people-centered design. Neverton Brom pointed to Utrecht's Vlietensweg as a world-class model.
And what's so fascinating about that is how it succeeds. They maximize the road space by intelligently integrating dedicated bus lanes, car lanes, and crucially, 2 wide protected bike lanes.
So by giving transit and cycling the priority,
you dramatically improve throughput for the majority of commuters. And that leads directly to reduced emissions and less congestion for the few cars left.
And Dania Alatami reminded us that true smart city design has to go beyond just efficiency. It has to be about livability. She suggests integrating granular accessibility data for wheelchair users, older adults, into digital twins.
So you're moving urban planning from just, ticking a compliance box to something that's genuinely human-centered.
That focus on urban design and optimizing resources, it leads us directly into our next theme: strategic infrastructure, investment, and regional acceleration. Sanna Tillikainen articulated this really crucial shift.
That parking is no longer just a real estate problem.
Exactly. It's evolving into critical urban mobility infrastructure, essential for things like EV charging and curbside management.
And AI is at the center of that evolution. Stephen McGough highlighted how AI-powered systems can track parking availability in real time.
Which allows for dynamic pricing.
Dynamic pricing, and critically, it reduces driver search times by up to 30%. And that reduction in just cruising for parking, that's a huge congestion reliever in crowded cities.
So if the infrastructure is getting smarter, where's the capital flowing? Kirsten Heineke and Timo Muller noted that investors are now demanding precision. The speculation is over.
Exactly. We're seeing a consolidation trend. In autonomous tech, the deals are getting fewer but much, much larger. They're driven by the huge capital needs for advanced AI and the scarcity of things like semiconductors.
So investors are backing the clear winners who can build out whole ecosystems.
And in electrification, that consolidation is focused on large-scale ecosystem builds, integrated value chains, not smaller, fragmented bets. Investors want reliable scale.
Geographically, we have to look at where that capital is flowing fastest. Johan C. Bordes emphasized the blistering pace of acceleration in the Middle East.
Particularly Saudi Arabia.
The growth is driven by massive state investments in urban air mobility, advanced tech, all to support a projected 150 million visitors by 2030.
That is a staggering target. And Hashim Al-Fatayerji confirmed that they aren't just planning this future, they're building it now. They're using the cost sandbox for testing everything from hydrogen buses to drones.
With an aggressive target of 30% EVs by 2030. It's a really comprehensive, accelerated strategy.
But acceleration isn't just limited to the big petrostates. We're also seeing vital innovation in emerging markets. Alexandria Lanik detailed Wahoo Mobility in Ghana, for instance.
And the key there is the locally manufactured part, right?
That's the key. These are electric bikes designed specifically for African road conditions, not just adapted imports. And they're tapping into a projected $4.2 billion African EV market by 2030 by using appropriate technology.
That kind of local relevance is absolutely crucial for real, scalable adoption. And that transitions us perfectly into our final theme, sustainable transport and the political pathway.
Yeah, Roberto Boscolo's post on World Sustainable Transport Day was a pretty sobering reminder. Transport is still the largest source of global carbon emissions.
Which means every single journey is fundamentally a climate choice.
And that choice has a measurable impact. The data shows that choosing shared mobility, public transport, or carpooling can save up to 2.2 tons of CO2 per person per year.
We're also seeing some serious infrastructure commitments in Europe to help people make those better choices. Michael Brecht highlighted the high-speed rail expansion.
Right, the Munich-Berlin connection and the new Hamburg-Copenhagen route.
They're practical solutions that just efficiently reduce our reliance on carbon-heavy short-haul flights.
But inside the city, the efficiency problem is much more. Well, pedestrian. Tamer ALZUBI pointed out the silent crisis. 75 to 80% of vehicles in congestion are carrying just one person.
One person. The solution there isn't more roads.
No, it's better utilization. He suggests pushing the fixed-route carpooling model, like BlaBlaCar in Spain, to aggregate passengers along set routes. You reduce single occupancy without adding any more cars.
And to make those choices work, integration is everything. Jeffrey Mathies shared a great insight from the Polis conference. A massive 66% of shared bike users are willing to pay more for seamless integration with public transport.
It confirms they're not competitors.
Not at all. As he said, they are the perfect marriage.
So we've really covered a lot of ground. An industry balancing this high-stakes global AV race driven by tech and cost competition with the fundamental need to redefine urban space through all these micro-decisions on parking, cycling, and transit.
And that operational balance brings us to the final and maybe most crucial point, the challenge of political momentum.
Russell King summarized the core issue perfectly. We have the technical knowledge for people-oriented transport. We know bike lanes work. We know better buses work.
But we lack the effective political strategy to implement them.
That's a profound thought, isn't it? If we know the solutions work, where do mobility leaders even start to apply pressure? At the national level or the neighborhood level?
King suggests the path forward is to focus on creating momentum through small, intensely appealing local wins.
So think school streets, neighborhood bike lane improvements.
Small public realm upgrades. These visible local successes, they accumulate. They build public support and eventually force the larger systemic change that the mobility industry so desperately needs.
That's a powerful call to action for every leader listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, new episodes drop every 2 weeks. Also, check out our other editions on electrification and battery technology, next-gen vehicle intelligence, and commercial fleet insights. Thank you for joining this deep dive, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.